Good morning to everyone. Morning. And a greeting of peace, some of you will know, Om Shanti. Some of you know it. Who's actually here for the first time at the retreat centre? Great. Welcome, welcome. So, the theme of the talk today, the dignity of diversity. And definitely, when we look at our world, it's a very, very diverse world. And it's diverse in terms of culture, language, ethnicity, ideas, opinions. There's diversity in every aspect of life. And if you think about 7 billion, or maybe more than 7 billion people on the planet at the moment, no two people will be thinking the same thought at any one time, or have the same idea at any one time. So in a way, there's a diversity of 7 million straight away. But then I was looking up some facts and figures, and do you know how many languages there are in the world? Spoken languages. Any guesstimates?
7,624.
Oh, well, you have a bit, I don't know which website you looked at, but I have 6,912.
Close enough.
Close enough. But imagine, and over 1,000 of those languages are spoken in Africa, and in 30 of the 32 or 33 London boroughs, in each one of those 30 boroughs, over 100 languages are spoken. So we're a very diverse community. And the island of Papua New Guinea, a single island, has 820 languages. Yes, I was amazed. And so there's a huge amount of diversity, but are there things that are common? Are there things that also bring us together? And the linguist, Chomsky, very well-known linguist, he speaks about the deep structure of language. And by this he means that essentially all languages are the same, because any child in any context can learn any language, no matter what are the languages of its biological parents. So, and just yesterday I was with someone who, she's actually from Brazil, she's Brazilian. Her parents are Japanese, she looks completely Japanese. And I asked her, well, do you know any Japanese? Not a word, only speaks Portuguese. So there's a propensity for language that exists in all of us. And then I was looking at the whole thing of race, and anthropologists will divide up into 4 or 5 basic racial categories. But what's very interesting about that is that every human being shares 99.99 plus genetic material. So actually, there's no biological basis for race. It's subjective. We're one human race, one human family. And then I looked at the whole thing of religion. And most sources say there's about 30 major religions in the world. And most people think that religions are basically a cause for war. And I was mentioning a cartoon I saw yesterday, and it showed all these fighters praying. They're praying, and they have guns on their backs. And there are the labels: Christian, Muslim, Buddhist, Jewish, etc. And they're all praying. And they show God in the clouds, you know, the traditional old man in the clouds. But this time he has his head in his hands and he's saying, what can I do? Everybody's fighting in my name. And then there's a little cherub trying to comfort God. And he says to God, well, you could change your name and go ex-directory. And so, what are we doing? And then there are 196 countries in the world, but more than 196 cultures. Very, very varied cultures. But there are also certain traits that you see in any organized society that are common as well. So, for example, things like a unit, a family unit to bring up children, some sort of structure for governance and taking decisions, ornamenting the body in some way. You know, there are certain things that are common that make up a culture, a sort of pattern of learned behaviours. So when we look at all the diversity, we can also see the commonalities that underlie these things. And of course, every culture has its own values. And I was recently hearing about a study of the values of two political parties in America, actually, Congress and Democratic, and what are they called? Republican and Democratic. And when they analysed the values of the people in those two parties, there was only a difference of one value. But of course, you can also say that how we live our values is different too. And in 1989, 1990, the Brahma Kumaris underwent a very interesting study. We were asking people to share with us their vision of a better world. And we asked people of all backgrounds, people from 88 countries actually. There weren't quite so many countries in the world at that time. And there were people who were, you know, in politics, people who street children, people who were teachers, all walks of life. And what was amazing about that was that there were different ideas, different expressions of those ideas, but there were common values that were expressed in the visions. And I'd like to just read you some of those values, because those values show us where we unite. So, joy, dignity, integrity, equality, love, harmony, respect, tolerance, goodwill, honesty, cooperation, peace, sustainability, and freedom. And you know, when you ask the question, whose values are these? The answer is our values, because these are universal values for all of us. And of course, when we're thinking about difference and diversity, we want to be able to, in the midst of that, uphold our own dignity and also the dignity of others. Because actually, if somebody is really a dignified person, they won't only think about their own needs, but they'll also be concerned about the needs of others. And this word dignity comes from the Latin dignitas, which means worthiness or to be worthy. And in our world today, I would say that dignity, human dignity, is the most precious thing that anyone can have. And unfortunately, there are too many things that take away a person's dignity. How do we know that we are really living in that state of dignity? There are a few things. First of all, a dignified person would not be so influenced by the opinions of others, but would not allow anything to compromise their conscience. And they would continue to do what they believe to be right. They would have that moral stature. And the conscience is that still small voice within that always guides us in a true way if we're willing to listen. And also, a dignified person would want to give to life rather than to take. Some of the best acts of charity can sometimes be self-serving. If I really want to have compassion, then it's very important that I have my own dignity. Because in a state of dignity, I'm not in a state of needing anything from anyone. I don't need to prove anything to anyone. But I know what is true and right. I will have access to my own inner wisdom. And this is the awareness from which we can truly give as human beings. There's a very nice story. In 2001, there was a severe earthquake. Well, that's not a nice thing, but the story I'm telling you, an earthquake in Bhuj in Gujarat in India. And, there were people who the day before had everything, and the next day had to even ask for a plate of food. So how do you maintain your dignity? And one of our sisters who was there on relief work told a very nice experience. She said she was distributing raw material for cooking, pulses and beans and things, and also cooking apparatus. And one of the people said to her that when you give to us, we don't feel as if we're losing our dignity. And I reflected on it, and I thought, when you give to your brother or your sister, a family member, it's a natural exchange, right? You don't think of it as a handout because of pity. So, when we're sharing, if I have that awareness that the world is my family and I'm sharing amongst my brothers and sisters, that's a very different awareness, a very different concept. I had a very interesting experience because, diversity is not only in these things, of course, of culture, of race, of religion, etc., etc. But think of the diversity of opinions and sometimes how difficult it can be to keep your dignity, keep your self-respect when somebody has a different opinion to you and you feel, I'm right and they're wrong. That's the point at which I can also lose my dignity and lose my tolerance at the same time. And then, all the values that I have of showing respect and being tolerant and being honest, when my buttons get pressed and I lose my dignity, then all of that can go out of the window. I had a very interesting experience when I was asked to go to a conference at a prison not very far from here in Grendon Underwood. It's Grendon Prison, the only wholly therapeutic prison in the UK. And in that prison, there's a culture of respect. The inmates and the staff are on first name terms. And, it's a prison where people are treated with a lot of dignity, but of course they have to go through a lot of process of self-transformation. And I was asked to go to this conference. And I have to admit, I made a whole load of excuses as to why I couldn't go. And when I ran out of excuses, somebody said to me, but you have to go. I thought, okay, when you're resisting something, there's something. And, I always thought of myself as this liberal-minded, compassionate person, but prison, no, thank you. Anyway, I went, and it was on power sharing in prison. And the inmates, the staff, participants were all mixing together, and you couldn't tell really who was who. And then I was talking to some of the prisoners, and they were telling me their stories. And suddenly I realised that I had thought of people in prison as something less than human. And I was quite ashamed. But I also saw it as an opportunity to grow and to learn. And of course I realised, oh, by the way, they're human beings. Part of the society that I live in. And of course, it was a very beautiful opening of awareness for me. And I thought, how many more moments like this am I going to face in my life, where I think I can respect everyone, and then I come up against a group of people who hadn't come in my frame before. And actually, we then increased our prison work as Brahma Kumaris, and just a year later, we held an event at our house in London that was very moving. It was called A Celebration of Human Dignity in Prison, and inmates and staff were performing on the same stage. And it was a whole opening. It's very important to understand how I can keep my own sense of dignity, and what is it that allows my dignity to be drained away. Most religions actually have a common thread of the golden rule. Do you know that? Some of you will know it. You will know it. Do unto others as you would have done unto yourself. So in Christianity, you shall love your neighbour as yourself. In Islam, none of you is a believer until he loves for his brother what he loves for himself. In Hinduism, this is the sum of duty. Do not do to others what would cause pain if done to you, and so on. When you go through the different religions, each of them has this core value. And so how can I achieve this in my own life? When I think about my own inner dignity, when I think about showing respect to others, no matter who they are, what they are, I really find that to grow that within myself, it's important to have a practice of inner silence, because it's in silence that I can come to know myself. I can connect with my own inner being, and I can begin to feel that self-worth and self-value that actually doesn't depend on anything external, and certainly doesn't depend upon knowing that somebody's different to me. And that own inner value and self-respect is what's going to enable me to show respect to another and have that dignity and respect in my own attitude and in my heart and mind. And from that I can begin to see others not according to the labels that they have. And we all have many labels, and it's not just in appearance, but labels of profession, labels of role, etc., etc. But I stopped seeing people as their labels and reacting even to their behaviour, because each one of us is playing a part in life, and that part is unique to us, and each one of us has a very unique contribution to make. And as I begin to see people not as the labels, not as the roles, I also begin to relate to the inner being of the person. And it's only in that even in the midst of sometimes the most challenging behaviour, I can see the original goodness that lies within them, as it lies within me. And all negativity comes from suppressing my own inner goodness. And as I have a negative attitude, I will tend to have the effect of suppressing it in others, because everything is reciprocated. As I am, so others will respond. If I think of somebody as challenging and negative, they will very well play their part to fulfill the idea that I have of them. If I see the inner goodness in someone, then I'm able to fan and grow the other inner goodness in them. And so I'd like us to just reflect for a moment to close on what it is I can do to develop that deeper sense of dignity in myself. Think about a situation that challenges your dignity, and we'll all have them. And just reflect by going into silence, by being in touch with who I am. How can I begin to transform my perception and my attitude, and so my response to that situation? Let's take a moment to reflect. Thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for reflecting. And actually, if you'd like to discuss anything else, there's a big round table under the tree just across from here, so we can gather there for a little while if you'd like to take up anything, because there's not much time for interaction in these talks. So if there's anything you'd like to ask, anything further you feel we'd like to explore together, then very welcome to gather at the table under the tree. And I'll ask you to leave from the centre aisle. And thank you again. Om Shanti. Thank you.